is another beautiful Monday morning, the 13th of February 2022 and 2023, sorry. And the program is the Dailies on Echo Television International, where we bring to you fresh and current news as they trend from our Nigerian newspaper. I'm Sana Elisha Dasho, and Rachel Taz is here with me too. Good morning,
Morning,
Rachel.
Sarah.
How you doing?
I'm fine. How about you?
Fine, thank you. How's the weekend?
It was fine.
All right. We're live on Facebook and also on YouTube, so you can drop your comment, drop your contribution, and also later on we will open the phone line so you can call us and let us hear what your inputs are concerning any story that is of interest to you this morning. Let's quickly run through the papers, and I'll be starting with the Blueprint newspaper. On coming from Jan, we have G5 governors not supporting Atiku but won't back Tinubu, with the writer says Lalong and followers daydreaming. INEC has no candidate in the election coming from Yakubu, the chairman. And a member of the Integrity Group, the former governor of Plateau State, Jonah Jang, has faulted Director General All Progressive Congress Presidential Campaign Council Governor Simon Lalong claimed that the G5 governors, led by the Rivers State Governor Nyesom Wike, were supporting the party's presidential candidate Bola Ahmed Tinubu. The rest members of the group are the Benue State Governor Samuel Otom, Ifeanyi Akuyi of Enugu State, we have Okeze of Abia, and Oyo State Governor Seyi Makinde. In a statement on Sunday, Jang said Nigeria no longer took anything coming from Lalong seriously. The statement, signed by Jang's media consultant Clinton Garuba, said the obvious sign that Lalong is daydreaming in him, thinking that the G5 PDP governors and allies, including the former governor Jang, are supporting Tinubu. They have repeatedly said that they do not have personal problem with Atiku Abubakar of the People's Democratic Party, but with the process that brought him up. Yes, the Integrity Group has disagreement with the PDP, and their withdrawal of the support for Atiku's campaign does not in any way suggest that they support the APC candidate. Only Lalong and his fellow dreamers think so. They have repeatedly said that they do not have personal problem with Atiku Abubakar of the People's Democratic Party, but with the process that brought him up. So you can read more of that on the front page and also on page 6 of the Blueprint newspaper. The big story after Buhari's 7-day grace, Council of State's intervention, Naira scarcity persists, Nigerians groan, with the rider black market blooms. Operators charge 6,000 Naira commission for 20,000 Naira. More states join the battle as Supreme Court and governors warn on recession. NOA sleeping on duty, scarcity killing farmers, food crisis looms coming from the APC. Let old and new notes coexist, Tinubu begs Buhari. Release new Naira note, respect will of the people, PDP CISLAC tells the federal government. We have capacity to produce redesigned note coming from the NSPMC. You can read more of that story on page 25, and permit me to read a little of the detail of that story. The Nigerian Governors Forum has warned that the continued scarcity of the 200 Naira, 500 Naira, and 1,000 Naira new notes may lead to economic recession as well as severe food inflation. The forum, in a communique issued at the end of the meeting on Saturday, lamented that though the Attorney General of the Federation, Abubakar Malami San, said the federal government will comply with the order of the Supreme Court of Nigeria notifying the February 10 deadline for the validity of the 3 old notes, Nigerians have not experienced any change so far. The inability to use the new note has far-reaching economic effect, leading to the emergence of the Naira black market, severe food inflation, variable commodity prices based on the method of exchange, and long queues as well as crowd around the automatic teller machines, which is the ATMs, and banking halls across the country, with individuals hoping to get a fraction of their money in new notes to meet their daily livelihood. The communique, signed by the chairman of the forum and Sokoto State Governor Aminu Tambuwa partly read, the continual runs the risk of a CBN-induced recession, while we acknowledge the submission of the Attorney General of the Federation that the federal government will comply with the ruling of the Supreme Court. And I think this is a story that everybody is affected one way or the other, because we are looking forward to a better Nigeria. And with the fact that election is just by the corner, is drawing closer by the day, we have INEC telling us they're ready, CBN promising to provide them with money, NNPC promising to give them fuel. But we're not going to rule out the fact that Nigerians are going through a lot of hardship as it is presently. We're unable to get access to our Naira note. Lots of banks are shutting down. It's very difficult for you to transact. Even the USSD is very difficult for some banks. And rumors left, right, and center are coming that some banks are hoping to, shut down as a result of that. Even though some, I think the past week or 2 weeks ago, had to close some of the banks because of chaos coming from Nigerians. But at a time like this, a lot is going on. And I remember last week when we said, CBN said they didn't see this coming. And I said, it's normal when there is a change in any form, whether it's when it comes to changing of the Naira note, any form of change, definitely people react to it, because when there is an action, definitely day, which is the 15th, to hear what finally will be the Supreme Court final verdict on all of this. We know that, yes, there's still the Naira note is still scarce. We can see it on the paper. Imagine paying 6,000 Naira just for it all, but we're seeing much more. Black market, you keep mentioning the fact that we keep using Naira to buy Naira, and we've been doing it for a long while, but we just didn't realize it's right now that it's steadying on us. So I don't know what the governors are doing, even though we're saying more governors are joining the 3 previous governors that sued the federal government to court, which is Kogi, Kaduna, and Zamfara. We can see more governors are joining, because in fact, the hardship is really telling a lot of Nigerians. And if things continue like this, I do not know if people will turn out for the election. But our desire is not for the people who are causing this heart pain or heartache to actually succeed in making Nigerians not to. We can see that the NSPMC say they have the capacity to produce the redesigned notes. And now the question will be, if you have the capacity, what is the problem that we're yet to see this Naira, circulating? So we'll keep our fingers crossed, and we hope to see what will be done at the end.
At this point, it has passed the level of banks hoarding it. I don't think now the issue is about hoarding. I believe it's more of the notes not being available. And then it boils, now we can take it back to the CBN and say they should please make these notes more available, because I don't want to think the banks are hoarding, because if you look at the system, I keep saying it is a process. It's like I own a fuel station, for instance. Yes, there are people who hoard, but it will reach the point in time where I can't hoard it for so long, because I need to sell this petroleum, make my profit too long. So I want to believe that this is the case with the banks now. Have there been hoarding in the past? Yes. Have there been individuals who have gotten access to these notes above the minimum requirement that the CBN has given as a policy? Yes. There has been those shady deals. But I want to believe that at this point now is beyond hoarding. I think it's just that the Naira is scarce and unavailable, because these banks need to transact. The percentage they get from transaction is what amounts to the profit. Even banking is like owning a bank, and all of that is a business. They have stakeholders, they have shareholders. So yes, it's beyond that. It's beyond that point where we could just sit down and say banks are hoarding the notes. But I believe that it's just a scarcity, just like we are having with our fuel as it is now. I think this is the same thing for the Naira notes. And it just boils down to who is responsible for making these Naira notes available. Then we can go back to the CBN. Okay, if you're standing on your deadline of exchange and all of that, make the notes available. We know you had a plan that is to reduce the circulation of notes out there. However, Nigeria has grown. If we've had success in the past where a short period of time has been given, for a new naira to be in circulation and the old one out. Let's forget that 15 years ago, Nigeria was not 200 million plus in population. Secondly, let's not forget that we had a currency which had more value,
True.
meaning 1,000 naira. We didn't even have it at then. Had
Mm-hmm.
was 200 naira had a high value, 500. But now we are in a country where our naira doesn't have that much value again. So of course, what was achievable 10, 15 years ago in Nigeria cannot be achievable as it is presently. So let the CBN make this note available. You've gotten enough back into your system. It's time now that you sit down and see what is good enough for Nigerians that will take us out of this hardship and scarcity. And if that will be done, I believe the problem that we are facing will go away, hopefully.
You know, Rachel, while you were talking, my mind quickly went back. I remember the CBN saying that all ATMs will be having from 200 naira downward. What's the
Exactly.
problem?
So what's the problem?
If I should go to the ATM, I'm supposed to be withdrawing 15 naira, 100 naira.
100 naira. True.
The money should be circulating. So
It
must
should.
we have 200, 500 and 1,000 in the
must
ATM?
not.
You can still have your 15 naira,
You
still have
can.
100 naira in the
It should
ATM,
be
and
like
you still
that.
go about your business.
Yes.
I believe when we go back to using the 15 naira and the 100 naira as a higher denomination, while we still wait for the 200 and
It's
1,000
true.
to be made available later,
Exactly.
I mean, that will tell a lot. Our naira will begin to have value
It
again. So
It
I just
will.
hope that let's look into that direction. If the CBN have told us a higher denomination in the ATM was going to be 200 downwards, so I wonder what the
What's the
problem is
problem?
presently.
True.
Well, we keep our fingers crossed on
Yes.
that. Let's continue with other stories still on the Blueprint newspaper. Nigeria's telecom subscribers hit 222 million naira, and we have internet 155 million. You can read more of that on page 7 of the Blueprint newspaper. 22 killed in fresh cholera outbreak in Ibuye. That's really sad. We hope they do something. The weather is becoming more dry and the rainy season will soon be here. So every government of every state should tighten their belt, work with the Commission of Health, the ministries, and let's do something about all of these illnesses. Buni was never stoned at Yobe North rally coming from the media aid. Wike denies sending assassins after Sikabo. And we have Water Institute seek NIMET support to curb flood and drought. Lagos school driver kills pupil's father over sexual abuse. Read more of that on page 9. And we have the DPO, 4 others killed in terrorist attack on Mina Abuja Road, which you can find on page 9. And we have pandemonium in Ilori as tanker explode, fire got federal secretariat. We have a picture story here where we can see the chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commissioner, Professor Mamu Yakubu, addressing the training officers during his inspection visit to the training venue of supervisors and presiding officers at the government secondary school, Garki, Abuja, on Saturday. And that's all on the Blueprint newspaper.
On the Daily Sun newspaper, can PFN disown alleged Obi's 2 billion naira mobilization legacy? I never wrote such letter, says alleged author. You can read that story on page 28. Coming from NYSC, I served honorably discharged, coming from Imba Enugu PDP governor candidate. And the big story on Daily Sun, confusion as Nigerians reject old Naira notes. The writer says, shun Supreme Court order. Governors urge federal government CBN to listen to voice of reason. Direct state accountant generals to join suit at Apex Court. ATMs empty new notes remain scarce after CBN's deadline, family stuff. And you can read all of those stories on page 2, 6, and 20. Still on the Daily Sun newspaper, fuel stations flood federal government directive, insists on cash payment. Tinubu will win Rivers convincingly, coming from the APC, and they are boasting. Pope Francis creates Aguilera Diocese, appoint Izizo Pioneer Bishop, and you can read that on page 27. Kogi to IGP on Bawa, allowing convicts to roam the streets, potent danger to the judicial system. asks police to immediately arrest EFCC boss, commit him to prison. Army will ensure conduct of free, fair elections. This is the GOC assuring us, and you can read that on page 26. And there is a coup. Invite Fani Kayode to explain allegation. Atiku tells DSS and police. This is on a coup, and you can read that on page 28. At the downside of the paper, we have page 5. We have a picture story where we can see the Apostolic Nisio of Nigeria and the rest in Abuja yesterday, and that's all the
unity and worsening economy coming from the Catholic bishops warn against do or die politics as general elections draw near. And on the Naira scarcity Nigerians, you can find that story. Banks await fresh directives from reason. Naira black market booms as more persists, and we have made our recommendation coming from Customers Association. Hearing from the Supreme Court, it's expected that the CBN should either tell us, are we going to be using the old notes or not? Because I think that is the reason why there's confusion. Customers and a lot of people are rejecting. As it is presently, I think we'll just wait for Wednesday to hear what the final mandate will be, and then we'll know the next step forward. But I hope that something is done about that fast. Still on the Vanguard newspaper, Naira redesign stop economic chaos, NECA urges the federal government. CBN to court, returning old notes will encourage vote buying and kidnapping. You can read more on page 10. And on Turkey, Syria, quick death exceed 28,000. UN expect tour to double. Then we know what the people that have been done, and we send our love to them. Bandit killed DPO and 4 other policemen in Niger State. You can find that story on page 6. Old notes deadline, governors direct Attorney General to review suit at the Supreme Court. That you can find on page 5. Desperate propaganda can derail our momentum. This is coming from Obidatsi. You can find that on page 9. We have an issue that took place within the weekend. People's dead. Lagos government shot Christland Church, Christland School, and this is concerning the death of Whitney Adileron, and that you can arrest during the inter-house sport. But the parents are denying that she died of an electric shock coming from a candy machine there in the school. And this is second case that coming from a young girl of about the same age, you know. True. And right now we're having another case. I just hope that the school will tighten up, not just to Christland, but to every other, you know, school with an underlying illness. A checkup supposed to have been taken, so you know that can she run this particular meter, even if she loves sport. Maybe you should just make her run a 4x4. Still there, the parents are insisting that an autopsy should be taking place because they need to know what to check on the welfare of the student, whether it's through bullying or whether it's through molestation, because we keep hearing all of this is coming up, especially from high and big schools. So you can do well, grab the Vanguard newspaper and read any story that's of interest to you.
On the Voice of Liberty, Nigerians shun Supreme Court order reject old Naira notes. On insecurity, bandits block Mina Abuja Road, gun down DPO, other officers. On a Naira swap, Nigeria at risk of CBN-induced recession. Kubu, the Independent National Electoral Commission, has saying it is only interested in the electoral process. Boko Haram, girls, women, alleged abortion of 10,000 pregnancies by military under probe. This is coming from Reuters report. And on 2023 election, Atiku charges DSS police orders a vote to Tinubu ignored as he claimed, coming from Amgo States against previous.
On New Telegraph newspaper, 7 banks expect more of that story on the front page. This night you can check that story on page 23. Still on New Telegraph newspaper, 5 governors at crossroad over presidential candidate choice. You can find that story on page 9, 10, and 11. And Kegama to Nigerians, don't vote based on sentiment. Apprehension as Abuja pastor takes AK-47 rifle to the altar. You can read that story on page 7 and 10. Father of late Christland student suspend foul play demands probe into the death of his daughter. So you can read more of that on page 30. The big story on New Telegraph newspaper, Naira redesign. Joint suit against federal government, governor directs state attorneys general. As CBN confusing Naira redesign with cashless policy. Good idea with faulty implementation, says Olanko. And APC control states creating artificial scarcity coming from the PDP. I have nothing against Naira policy coming from Tinubu, so you can read more of that on page 2 and 5. And on the polls, we won't endorse mobilized support for any candidate coming from Khan. Say it's not aware of any 2 billion naira to churches from Obi. And I'd like to read that story a little. The Christian Association of Nigeria on Thursday distanced itself from the alleged 2 billion naira claimed to have been given by the presidential candidate of the Labour Party, Peter Obi, to churches under its umbrella. The Christian body also said it will probe the source of the petition in which the allegation was made, describing its content as untrue and malicious. The petition, allegedly written by one Pastor Frank Owimire and dated December 15, 2022, was addressed to the Khan president. The petitioner claimed that 2 billion naira was shared among some mega churches while some denominations were sidelined. So you can actually grab the New Telegraph newspaper and read more detail of that story. And we have laborious justice system fueling prison congestion coming from lawyers. You can read more on page 14 and 16. An article to INEC resists APC's pressure to postpone the polls. Still on presidency, why APGA should endorse Peter Obi by the ex-PSC chair Okeke. Tension in Benue as helicopter drops strange men in military uniform. You can read that on page 3 and 6. We have not received intelligence reports on that coming from the police. Header skill final year chemistry student. DPO 4 others killed in Niger as combined security force rebel bandit neutralize attack. You can read more of that on page 3 and 6. And on the state of the nation, federal government overwhelmed coming from the Catholic bishops, says many Nigerians resort to crime begging to survive, insists no presidential candidate give its money. Hoodlums attack set Ondo church ablaze, and 2023 polls critical for Nigeria coming from Bishop Mike Okonkwo. You can read that on page 4, 5, and 7. Downside, we have a study that says chemicals in nail polish may increase type 2 diabetes risks. Well, you can read more of that. On page 7, we have a picture story on the front page. Do well by grabbing the New Telegraph newspaper and read more stories that are of interest to you this morning. But before we move further with the newspaper review, we'd like to take a break at this moment so we can let you, chew the stories. Drop your comment on any story that's of interest to you. There tend to be a lot on the papers this morning, the back and forth on Naira scarcity, and also Khan also saying that they did not receive 2 billion naira from the Labour Party candidate. These and many other stories are what are on the papers this morning. So when we come back from the break, we'll take your calls and hear your views on any of the story that's of interest to you. Please do not go anywhere. We'll be right back after the break. Welcome back. If you're just tuning in, it's still the Dailies on Echo Television International, where we give you fresh and current news from our Nigerian newspaper. And right at this moment, our lines are open, so you can do well by calling us. The numbers are displayed on your screen. Please do remember to turn down the volume of your TV set or move away from your TV set so we can actually have a very good and smooth communication here in the studio. As we have Rachel Tanzi here with me. Thank you so much,
You're
Rachel.
welcome, Sarah.
All right, let's move on with the papers.
On Nature News, adopt mechanized sweeping on highways, Lagos sweepers tell the federal government. And you can continue with that story on page 3. The big story, Buhari approves work plan as Climate Change Council meet. The writer says Nigeria is set to lead Africa, says Environment Minister Abdullahi. DGNCCC Dr. Salisu Dahiru sets up structure. Council engages Ross Hill Group for carbon market framework. Nigeria achieved 75% sufficiency in rice production, coming from the minister. Stakeholders move to save the African donkey. You can start with that story on the front page and continue on page 5. And still on the earthquake, Turkey requests humanitarian aid from Nigeria. World Bank experts seek solution to land degradation in Yobe. BOIAFD partner to combat climate change in Nigeria, and you can read all of that on page 11. At the downside of the story, we have sports. Mikel Arteta complains of different rules for Brentford equalizer against Arsenal, and for our sport lovers, you can find that on page 21. We have a picture story where we can see the president with the Climate Council and members, and that all the news on Nature News.
On the leadership newspaper, bandit killed DPO, 4 policemen in Niger. Don't indict youth to violence, Olutayo caution politicians. You can find that on page 8. And we have a fact check that said, did Ijon National Congress endorse Peter Obi? There's a question you would love to get more inside the paper. Jamaica indicates interest to patronize Innoson Motors, and this is really a nice step in the right direction that will boost our GDP. And I hope that it also, as a country, will tend to patronize that, that motor, because it's made here in Nigeria. Despite caught bandit, custom auction petrol-laden truck as scrap. You can read more of that on page 7. And on the 2023 polls, be impartial, can Catholic bishops tell INEC? You can find that on page 7. And the Naira swap, which is a big story. Governors warn of recession as cash crunch bites harder. Asked the President Muhammadu Buhari and the CBN to listen to voice of reason. Private sector cries out over shortage, low sales. POS transactions slumps by 13%. I feel your pains, Tinubu tell Nigerians, and PDP insists PDP hoarding the new notes in states. You can read more of that on page 4. AIG Jemita slum and dies in Bini Hospital. You can find that on page 22. We won't abandon you, Okowa assure families of slain policemen. And we have fake opinion polls will cause violent NMPP warns. You can find that on page 8. We have a picture story. We can see the Apostolic of Nigeria and other bishops there. So you can grab the leadership newspaper and read any story that is of interest to you.
On Nigerian Tribune, invite Fani Kayode to explain coup allegation. Article tells DSS police. We are investigating death of 12-year-old Chrisland school student coming from the police. Lagos government orders school shut. NDLEA arrests Church General Overseer Theology student over Dubai-bound Met skunk at Lagos airport. The big story on Nigerian Tribune, Naira redesign. Nigeria at risk of CBN-induced recession. Governors warn. The writer says worry over emergence of Naira black market, severe food inflation. Tinubu wants Apex Bank to heed advice of Council of State. Release Naira notes you are hoarding, Article tells Tinubu and APC. Ekiti sues federal government to join Supreme Court suit. Nigerians shun Supreme Court order reject old naira notes, and you can read that on page 2 and 4. I want to believe that it's not the fault of Nigerians that they are shunning the Supreme Court order, because there's a lot of uncertainty on this. If I'm a business person, I'll be very skeptical. If I collect these old notes, what if I go to the banks and they don't accept it? Don't forget that it is not the federal government or the Supreme Court, let me put it, it's not the Supreme Court that is in charge of the money in this country. Everybody knows it's the CBN. Everybody knows it's the commercial bank. And we know that the CBN gives an order or a directive to the commercial banks, and the commercial bank have to adhere to it because they'll be at loss. For example, if I am Access Bank, I have to adhere to what CBN Bank says. If they say I should stop collecting old naira notes, I should stop, because if I should collect it and go back to CBN, they won't collect it from me. So it is a back and forth that, of course, I also, as a business person, I'm not sure that when I take my money to whichever bank I am banking with, they will collect it, because nobody knows for sure, because Supreme Court is on another side, CBN is on another side, but we all have it at the back of our mind that it all boils down to whether our banks will collect this money, not the Supreme Court. So it's understood that I think the case here is not Nigerians shunning the Supreme Court, but they want to hear from the mouth of CBN telling them it's okay, keep using these old naira notes, your banks will collect it, and we are going to collect it. I think that's what every Nigerian wants to know. Not basically, we're not saying the Supreme Court don't have power, but we know who we deal with when it comes to money. So I believe that at this point, let the CBN comes out clearly and tell Nigerians what's at stake. Are you still collecting the old notes, or for those who still have the old notes, will they be running at loss, or what it is? But then we need to know for sure where we stand concerning this whole old naira notes and new naira notes. Still on Nigerian Tribune, bandit kills DPO, 4 others in Niger. INEC redistributes voters to less congested polling units. Kogi government wants IGP to immediately arrest EFCC boss. And at the downside of the paper, we have Alafin on rebuild Akesen market in Oyo. And if you want to know all of that, get Nigerian Tribune for yourself. And that's all the news on the paper.
All right, let's take a look at the National Economy newspaper, where we have currency buying, selling, inflation rate, 2022-2021 commodity prices. And you can find that column there, read more detail to see how much silver is, gold, gas, and also bread in the market presently. And we have a caller this morning. Hello, Mr. Ima, good morning. Hello, Mr. Ima, good morning.
Good morning,
all right,
all of you.
Thank you.
You Stella in the studio. I want to comment on the collection of old note. Well, as your other tall dark Stella said, everyone is answerable to the Supreme Court in Nigeria. Even Buhari is answerable to the court. So let me not say that if Supreme Court said collect this old naira note, they will give instruction to Dole, they must to central bank, and central bank will pay. So don't say it's not the fault of
thank you, Mr. Ima from Bauchi, for that contribution to why Nigerians are not collecting the old note. And we've said that CBN is yet to say anything about it. We know that, yes, CBN is an independent body, but then Supreme Court is the highest highest court. And so when they give any mandate, it's expected that everybody obeys. But then, of course, just like you said, these commercial banks are waiting for CBN to say something. Even though I know CBN said that they'll still be collecting the old notes, even after February 10. But right now, the concern is they said earlier on that from that February 10, it ceases to be legal tender. So I'm expecting them to say, all right, let's keep on using those old notes. And then after Wednesday, whatever we hear from the Supreme Court, that would determine whether the old naira note will still be in circulation. But I think the reason why it's I cannot be speaking for CBN as it is presently, but just like we said, we just needed to come out and be clear about this. Yes, we are concerned about kidnapping, vote buying, because election is just barely less than 2 weeks from
Yeah.
now. So a lot of Nigerians just need to know where they stand. Nigerians are starving. Lots of people are hungry. You don't have a cash to go to the market. If you are living in the rural area, how do you get access of things? How can you sell your goods? It's just like I said, some of these USSD are not working. Some of the apps are, hanging, and so you won't blame even, some of these petrol stations that have defaulted. They hear whatever the government is saying that they should receive from POS. But how sure you that the alert coming in is even real? Because we know there are fake
True, there's
alerts and
fraud
all of that.
too
So
there, yeah.
definitely people are skeptical, with all of this transaction. But just like I said, right now we're not going to say much. We just wait to hear whatever the hearing will be from Supreme Court on Wednesday. That will determine the next line of action from CBN and also from the federal government. Still on national economy, we have a picture story here. Years after sorry story of building collapse in Nigeria continues, regulatory failure embodies quacks to compromise building codes. This is an investigation. And we've said this over and over. I would like to read a little under here that said, on the 12th of September 2014, locating within the Synagogue Church of All Nations premises and around Egbe area of Lagos State collapsed completely to the ground. The collapse took the lives of at least 115 people. 84 of them were South Africans. At approximately 11 a.m. on December 10, 2016, the biggest Bible Church International building roof collapsed from the center. The church had been under construction until shortly before the incident, with some reports stating that work was unfinished at the time of collapse. The construction has been rushed to prepare the church from the online. All right, we have another caller. Hello, Mr. Daniel from Kaduna.
Hello.
Good morning. Hello, Mr. Daniel. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning. How's the work?
Fine, thank you, sir. Please go on with your
I
contribution.
want to say that I'm happy to hear the news from my son, but Pope Francis have announced the Catholic Diocese of Aguilera and appoint Bishop Dennis as the first bishop.
All right, thank you, Daniel, for that.
It's a good news to hear.
All right,
We thank God.
all right, thank you so
Good news
much.
as we coming to Nigeria.
All right, thank you. Just congratulating the appointment made by the Pope himself concerning the appointment of the bishop. And all of the story, you can read more of that. I think basically what this picture story is just talking about the buildings we've been having collapse. I think just recently, was it 2 weeks ago, we saw a collapse in Abuja.
Yes.
Yeah, where we saw some, rescue team trying to rescue. All of this boils down to us having lots of quack materials being used. People compromising on materials you build, and then at the end of the day, we see that lives are lost because somebody somewhere has actually relaxed on his responsibility and choose his own personal interest, and then against the life of other people. So I hope that we'll take our lessons, because the whole of this thing is trying to take us down time memorial from 2014 down to 2023. We're still having story buildings collapsing, especially in various parts of the country, Lagos, Oyo, Abuja, and all of these places where we see story buildings. So I hope that we take our lessons and then we don't keep doing things the same way. Downside of the paper, technology adoption and Nigerians' energy transition. You can find that on page 19. NCCM fines on companies by regulators. Shareholders express worry. You can find that also on page 5. How to capture more Nigerians in the tax net. You can find that story on page 12 of the national economy. And that's all on the national economy.
On the Abuja Inquirer, Naira scarcity, FCT market women lament low patronage. And the big story, FCT area council share 38.363 billion naira in 2022. The writer says no record of IGR council officials norm. Abuja resident says nothing to show. And we have a picture story where we can see people going through the Abuja Enquirer. And if you want to know what is in the paper, get the Abuja Enquirer. There's a story that says Jam summons over 30,000 naira UTME fees. You can read that on page 10, and that's all the news on the Abuja Enquirer.
Let's take a look at the Business Day newspaper. How Buhari failed to hit council on Coyote Naira redesign project. You can find that on page 30 of the Business Day newspaper. Nigerian businesses risk worst credit crunch in 7 years. Supermarket, banks, and all Naira collection. 4 ways to prevent violence in 2023 election, coming from the crisis group. And I think everybody needs to read this, how we can avoid violence, by checking page 6 of the Business Day newspaper. The big story here says 31 governors pile up 4.8 trillion naira debt for successors. You can find that story on the front page and also on page 38 to see what has to do with all of the debt. So you can do well by reading more of the story. We have other picture stories on the front page, so you can do well by grabbing the Business Day and read any story that's of interest to you.
On the Wheel newspaper, factors that will shape 2023 presidential election. You can read that on page 10. And we have RT 200, 1 year of landmark game changer in non-oil export. We have the big story. Despite assurances, anxiety mounts over 2023 general elections. And we have a drawing or a cartoon where we can see the INEC chairman Yakubu and then the ballot boxes for the 2023 general elections with the caption on top, vote. So we should all vote on the 25th of February this year. God keeping us alive. And that's all the news on the Wheel newspaper.
All right, let's take this last paper, which is the Business AM, where we have analysts call out Obi Tinubu Atiku for insurance snub in economic agenda. Insurance key in reforming weak economy. You can read that on the front page and also on page 2. We have from news, Nigeria ranks last in global wage survey. And on finance and investment, $9.7 trillion credit card spent by 2027. And we have negating post-election political risks. It's a comment you can find on page 18. The big story for the paper, Obi Kwankwaso Atiku Tinubu, competitive inclusive economy, a must-do for Nigeria's next president. In Brookings Institution article, analyst outlines priority areas for new government. Highlights include job creation, bringing productivity gap, as 80% of workers employed in sectors with low level productivity. And I think this is something we really need to look into. We have more people in the sector that brings nothing into the economy, rather than having more people in the sector that can do more. So we have to look more into agriculture. We need to look more into having our ICT, which is digital space, and also on security. And I think education too, we need to do more about that. When we take time to do more on this sector, then you can see that if we work more on our digital space, we will now be making, rather than being a consuming country, we produce more of our cars, more of our inwardly. Agriculture will not have any issue with food crisis or any form when our students are educated. And I think we have to take a look at our curriculum, that we're still operating on 1970s curriculum. We need to look at our curriculum having updated, innovative, things that will make our students to be up and about, and they can rub shoulders with people of other countries. So I think this is really something that the incoming president, whoever he will be, really need to look into all of this things. So we have other stories flying on the front page, so you can do well, grab the Business Day AM newspaper with more stories that are of interest to you. And it is how far we can go on the program this morning. Thank you so much, Rachel, for always being here to do this with me. Thank you to our crew members. Thank you to our callers and also our supporters. Until we come your way again tomorrow, do have a blessed day ahead.